Let's get across the market open now. Henry Jennings joining us from Marcus today. Henry, I don't know about you, but I have extreme whiplash. What did you make of that reaction, given the announcement from Donald Trump? We do now have that 90-day reprieve.
Yeah, good morning, Andrew. Good morning, viewers. I have to say it's making my head spin. I've been doing this for a long time. I started in the 80s, and I've never seen anything like this, to be honest. And the Trump administration taking credit for making America great again and making the markets great again is fine, but they were the ones that made the markets in the slump that it has had. And I think at the end of the day, there was certainly one thing as I was heading out of the office last night and writing an article for today, which has had to been scrapped, of course, because it's completely out of date, was the effect that was happening in the bond market. And we did see, I guess, a certain amount of stress being called at the long end, with those yields in long bonds falling as investors dump long bonds. And this is always the concern, I guess, is that the Chinese, who are big holders of US treasuries, weaponize long bonds and weaponize treasuries and sell them down. Of course, that is, I guess, it's shooting themselves in the foot to some extent because it would crystallize losses for them. But it is, I guess, the ultimate weapon that they have. And we've seen how both sides have ramped up the tariffs and the retaliation. And we saw that last night, of course, as Trump walked back from his kind of arbitrary tariff regime for most countries and put into place a 10% blanket across the board, at least for the next 90 days while they consider what to do next. So that was a kind of a worrying development. And I think at the end of the day, Scott Bessent, who seems to have the ascendancy over Peter Navarro, who is busy fighting Elon Musk over what BRICS are, we have seen Scott Bessent fronting the media along with the White House press secretary, and not Peter Navarro, who is very much, I think, been sidelined in this backflip. So it looks like Scott Bessent has got the president's ear in terms of the bond markets, what it could mean, and what the US needed to do to take the pressure off global markets generally. So that certainly is a positive. The SPY's up, nearly 500 points. So, this is going to be the biggest short covering rally that we've seen for a long time in the Aussie market. The question is, I guess, where it goes from there, because, we're going to open up 450, 500 points or whatever. The question is whether we kick on. The question, I guess, is whether what China does. Now they've got 125% tariffs on all products coming out of China. But interestingly, I guess their neighbors who do a lot of exporting for them through sort of third-party routes are only at 10% now, at least for the next 90 days. So it's going to be, I have to say, Andrew, markets are just so interesting at the moment, and the confluence between politics and the markets couldn't be more in this day and age, could it? I mean, you look at what's happening in America. It is just extraordinary, and we are living in extraordinary times. As I've written before, and as I've said before to viewers of Ausbiz, I think the key is not to panic at the moment, not to be pushed from pillar to post, not to have that whiplash, not to have sold out everything in the last few days thinking the world is going to end, running around like Chicken Little, and then today, everything's fine, it's wonderful, it's great, and buying back in again. I think this is still going to take some time to pan out.
Now, of course, Donald Trump will be taking credit for this, saying this is all part of the grand plan to bring these countries to the negotiating table. He succeeded in doing that, except China, of course. But critics will argue it was what was going on in the bond market there that forced his hand. Either way, Henry, it's just so unpredictable. So how can you make investment decisions? How can businesses make investment decisions in this current environment?
Well, I think that's the real problem, Andrew. It's very hard to make investment decisions, especially for business in this kind of environment. How do you plan for this? And they say that everyone has a plan until you get hit in the face by Mike Tyson. And to be honest, whether you're being hit in the face and it's going down, or whether it's being hit in the face and it's going up, the uncertainty and the lack of confidence going forward. I write an article last night and it's complete rubbish this morning because the world has changed in the blink of a tweet on Truth. So, it's very hard for investors. There is that propensity to have the whiplash, to get FOMO, to get that fear of missing out. We're embarking on the great bull market again. I think that's fallacious. I don't think we're going to be embarking on the great bull market. I think there is certainly wise heads that would caution against jumping in. There will be some people that do jump in and may do very well out of jumping in. But, the market that was terrible yesterday, up 500 points today, are you going to be buying BHP 10% up? Our biggest customer for Australia and our biggest benefit to our economy is China, and they are now effectively barred from the US. Whether it's 125, it go to 150, 200%, it doesn't really matter, to be honest, because there will be no orders going from China to the US. There might be orders going from China to Vietnam, to Cambodia, to Laos, etc., and then to the US, but Chinese exports to the US will drop off the planet.
Yeah,
so,
well, on that point, I mean, if those tariffs stick, in fact, if it escalates from here, which looks likely at this point, you'd have to say, this is going to hit Chinese demand and therefore impact us, particularly with our biggest exports. Yet, we're obviously seeing futures indicating we're going to have a very, very strong day today. So you would be very cautious then as a result?
I'm not sure about cautious. I'm cautious about being whiplashed all over the place and the FOMO. I just think we still need to see how the dust settles. Scott Bessent was on the TV this morning saying, they've known about this plan since Sunday, and he's been talking to Trump about, this pause in the tariff regime and ratcheting up the pressure on China. I have no doubt that the pressure on China is partly to do with this TikTok deal. And if China was to say, yeah, you know what, you guys can buy TikTok really cheaply, suddenly the tariffs will be a lot less. And I think, at the end of the day, there will be, maybe 10% is the across the board tariff, with some sectors of the export market from other countries being singled out for higher tariffs, maybe European cars, etc. But and Chinese tariffs will come down a long way from the 125%, because at the end of the day, we do live in a globalized world, which is actually complete rubbish in terms of grammar, but we do live in a globalized economy, and Apple are not going to make their iPhones in America. It is not going to happen if you don't want to spend $3,500 on an iPhone. So you've got to play to your strengths. It's like any football team. If the globe is a football team, you have people that are in goal, you have defenders, you have attackers, you have midfield. People play to their strengths, and that's what I think the globe has become. Obviously, some people are taking the proverbial, and China probably one of those, but you've got to play to your strengths. And the US has its strengths in technology and exporting the likes of Microsoft and Google and Netflix around the globe. But China has its strengths as well. So there has to be an agreement at some stage. It's just how much pressure the Chinese can take. And then, of course, it's a question of face and how they walk it back as well.